Hey everybody, how's it going? Nick here. So today we're gonna look at something quite cool that I've made. So this is an ad that has the option to be either stationary, so it's gonna be whatever you select at runtime, by the way, not from construction script. So if I change it, you will not see it now. So if I swap it to something like that, you will not see it, but at runtime it will. Or it can be switching dynamically based on a timer that we're gonna set. So when I hit simulate, you can see that it will be swapping around. This one is stationary and this one will be swapping, okay? Based on what it is you want. The cool part about this is really well optimized, and it all comes with one material instance, one static mesh, one single texture. That is it. Okay, now this one has some extra lines that I put in there, like for, making it look like more like a screen. You can easily do that. There are tons of tutorials that show you how to do that, but on this more technical side of things, there are not really any that I found that will show you specifically how to do this, or at least they're pretty hard to find. So I thought I would make one to show you how cool and easy it is to set this up in an optimized way. So I've already done this, but I'm gonna delete them and show you again. So what you need is a simple static mesh. So I made the frame and then I made the inside. The inside is literally just two planes, right, facing outwards. And what you need is to basically unwrap them from view and then flip the one in the back. Otherwise it's gonna be flipped, right? And they should look like this. So see, one is facing one direction, the other one is facing the other direction. And they're mapped exactly on a quarter of this 2000 by 2000 texture. It can be 1000 by 1000. It doesn't really matter. It can be a 500 by 500. You name it. Honestly, when you bring them into Unreal, you can always tell them to lock them at a specific size. But in my case, I just wanted to make them pretty big for now, so I wanted the ads to look nice. So I made it a 2K. Be careful. 2K, I mean literally 2K. So 2000 by 2000. Don't make it like a 2048, because when you input them into Affinity or Photoshop or whatever it is you use, and you use the rulers to actually, bring in the guides, you want to snap it to exactly the 1000 mark, at least in my case. If you do it 1000 by 1000, you want to snap them to the 500 mark. And if you do them for the 500, by the 250 mark. If you have it at 2048 here, and you snap them to the 1000, it's not going to map correctly when you UV it. So do it, like a solid, nice, round 1000 by 1000 or 2000 by 2000, okay? That will do the job. And then, you put your designs, whatever it is you want. For me now, this is very temporary, but I just wanted to have something to show for it. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So you map it there. Why we map it exactly in this area? Because in Unreal, we can dynamically make the material switch between this, and this, okay? And I will show you exactly how. So we export this static mesh, which by the way has two materials. So the ads material, which is this one inside, and everything else, which is base material, which is for the frame. Inside Unreal, this is the one I've already made, but I'm gonna go in the tutorial folder. That's all I have. So I have the static mesh, so SM_ ads, which is this, and as you can tell, it has two different materials, one for the frame, and this one is empty, so it's world grid material, and my beautiful little texture. So first things first, what we want to do here. So the first thing we're going to want to do is create a master material. So we're going to make a master material, call it mm_ads. I'm just going to keep this very simple with the nomenclature and everything. I'm just going to open it up and drag in my texture. Now, what I want to do, I'm not going to go crazy with the shader, by the way. I'm just going to keep it very, very simple, because this is not a shader tutorial. So you can, if you hold M for mark and you left click, you get a multiply node. So get a multiply, put in the emissive, click one, left click, get a scalar parameter, convert it to a parameter, and call this intensity. This is the emissive intensity. I'll put it on a default value of 0.5 because I feel like it's strong enough. Then we're gonna need an add node, an append vector, and an add node. Perfect. So in the add node, we're gonna put the texture coordinates. There you go. Plug that in. And in the append node, we're gonna need two scalars, right? One for the X, one for the Y. And I'll show you how this works in a second. So this one, by the way, we convert it to a parameter, call it main text, because God knows I might use it for something else. And these two, we're gonna also convert them to a parameter, and you need to be careful with naming these two, all right? Because I will show you later why. but name them something that makes sense. For example, UV offset X. This is going to be the UV offset on the X, and this is going to be the UV offset on the Y. So I'm just going to copy and Jesus Christ and paste it and swap it to Y. Now, the way this works is exactly like this. So look at this ad, right? So I have Hyperion on the top left, Duarte on top right, Vector on bottom left, and the Oni on bottom right. So what I want to do is if I hit 0.5 on the X, you will see that it moves exactly halfway through, and now I have Duarte on the top left. If you remember right, we unwrapped our beautiful little ad window specifically in this area. So this is gonna now display Duarte. If I go back on 0, it's gonna be Hyperion again, but if I hit 0.5 on the Y, it's now gonna show vector trade routes, as you can see. And if I hit 0.5 on both, it's gonna show the Oni on top left. So now I'm gonna leave it on a default of 0, so it's not mapping anything. I mean, it's mapping the top left one now. Hit apply, and that's it for now. What I wanna do, I wanna create a material instance, call it mi_ads, and that's pretty much it. Now, I'm just gonna, for the sake of having it set, I'm gonna actually set it here as well. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna open the content browser with Control spacebar, click on mi_ads, and put the material instance in here. As you can see now, it's only Hyperion Translunar ad. I will save, get back out, and in here, I'm gonna right click and create a blueprint class, actor, call it bp_ads, let's just call it square ads. And now I want to open this. So what we need first of all is going to be a static mesh. So I'm going to make a static mesh. I'm going to call it add frame. Perfect. And I'm going to actually open the content browser, click on our static mesh, and click here to make it appear. Perfect. Now, next thing I need is 2 rectangle lights, and I'll show you later why. I mean, okay, I can tell you straight away. So why we use rectangle lights? Why? Because I want to illuminate the wall by using the rectangle lights. I do not want to illuminate, you don't want to illuminate things by using the emissive of materials normally, although now with megalights it's changing. But for now I'm still going to use the old school way by lighting things up with the actual lights, which is going to make the light product way less noisy. So for now I'm just going to leave it yeah, I'm just gonna leave it like this for now, nothing crazy. I might want to make a general control for the intensity, and at least the intensity and the units, but for now I'm gonna leave it on lumen and just leave it on that intensity, which is fine. Copy paste it, grab the second one, move it back, and rotate it, not like that. Rotate it on the Z by 180 degrees, and move it a little bit more back. Okay, great, and that's our blueprint done. Now we can compile and save, and we can, and that is crooked. Excuse me, sir. Ah, that's the one. Right, so as you can see now, we have the ad, and we have these, yeah? And that's all cool, but we wanna go above and beyond and make this actually really nice. So what we wanna do, we go into the event graph, delete the actor begin overlap and event tick. And the very first thing we want to do is actually go back, because we're missing one crucial thing, which is very important. If you right click here and go in this search bar and look for Enum, you can pull in an enumerator. So we call this I'm gonna call it tutorial add types. We can double click it. What's an enum? An enum is an enumerator, and it's a container for a bunch of strings, right? And this will create a drop-down menu. So like what this will do for us in very simple terms is we will get that little drop-down that you saw with the names of the ads. And so that we can tell our blueprint to switch the ad based on this drop-down selection that we have. So what we can do is call them with the names. So the first ad, for example, is going to be 0 Hyperion. Enumeration always starts from 0, by the way. This is not also going to give us any ints, so any integers or anything like that. This is just for me to know to which int this should correspond. Okay, and later I will show you how to map it to a specific int. Then we're going to have 1. This is going to be Duarte. We're then going to have 2, which is going to be, oh god, what was it? Vector. And then we're going to have 3, which is Oni. And those are all my ads mapped. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Perfect. Now we can go back into the blueprint. And the first order of business is going to be grab our ad frame, drag off of it, and look for create dynamic. And we call in this function, which is called create dynamic material instance. What this is going to do is that it's going to grab a material instance, right? And it's going to create a copy of it, so to speak. That is not going to affect at all the original material instance, okay? So you can do stuff to it, and it's not going to affect the original. So first thing, we need to change the material element. The element index is wrong. It was on 0, but if we go check our ad frame, our element that we need to change is in the ads is going to be element 1, which is this one, right? So we click on element index 1, and our source material, we can just click on mi_ads and call it in. Now this is going to be made a copy and modified, but first things first, we drag off of this, promote it to a variable. And we're going to call it dynamic mat instance. Great. So I will keep it very simple, and we're going to move up from there. Okay. So what we want to do first, we're going to call in switch on e_tutorial add types. Now, what this is doing, this is giving us that little context menu that you saw. And as you can see, I have all of my ads in here, right? That I made in this enumerator. So you see the names are exactly the same. And what this will do is that depending on where this selection is going to fire off a different execution pin. Okay. So if now Oni is selected, it will fire off only this execution pin. All right. Now this selection here is of type, as you can see, e_tutorial add types. This is not an int. It's not an integer. It's not a float. It's not a bool. Is specifically this type. So what we want to do, because right now we can only set it hard code it, and we don't want to hard code this, we want to have it as a variable, we can drag off and we can promote it to a variable. We can expose then this one. So like we can make it public so that we can see it in the blueprint and give it a name. We're going to call it selection enum. Awesome. Compile and save. Now, if I go back to my scene and click on the ad, you can see that now I have the selector enum. Now, nothing's going to happen when I, when I change this. I mean, it's not going to happen anyway because it's going to be on begin play. So you won't see any difference until we hit simulate, but nothing is going to happen because there's nothing connected here. But we're going to now change that. So I'm going to grab our dynamic material instance. So control, drag, and release, and it's going to give you the getter for it. And we're going to look for set scalar parameter value. Awesome. So this is going to change a specific parameter value, a scalar to be precise, as you can see, within this dynamic material instance, which is a copy of that material instance that we made, which is this one. So if I open it, you can see that we have our variables, UV offset X, UV offset Y, which are those that we exposed to as parameters, right? So what we want to do is we want to grab these names. No, my God. We're going to grab these names. So for example, I'm going to copy this and I'm going to input it in here. And now what's going to happen is that this is going to change this parameter in this dynamic material instance by this exact float. This is a float. You see the color of it? That's a float. You can also hover over the pin and it's going to tell you float single precision. Now, duplicate this because that's only the X. Now we need the Y. So we can delete X, put it Y, and now we have our X and Y coordinates. Now for the first add, and also don't forget to connect the dynamic material instance pin. Now I'm actually going to create, for the sake of being a little bit more neat, I'm going to create a reroute node here and just, right. Okay. and just connect it to the target. So for the first add, Hyperion, we know is 0, 0 on those coordinates because it's going to be mapped on the top left, so we don't need to change anything. But then what we're going to do, we're going to copy paste it a bunch of times and realign them. There you go. And connect the rest of the pins. And then we're going to connect our dynamic material instance, which, by the way, you can also shift click on this and just drag it off. Just like that. And here we're going to do exactly the same. Sick. So now the Duarte add, it was the same row, but it was a 0.5 on the X. So the Y we're going to leave it unchanged, but 0.5 on the X. This, however, which was the vector, this was the bottom one. So the X is going to be unchanged, but the Y is going to be a 0.5. And the last one, which was the bottom right, is going to be 0.5 on both. Because I needed to switch on 0.5 on both X and the Y. And for now, we're going to leave it like this. So if we compile and save, head back, and now we switch this to something like vector, and I hit begin play by hit simulate, you will see that now it changes to vector. And if I change it to Duarte, you will see that it will change to Duarte as well. Perfect, it's working flawlessly. But we're not done yet. We also have our lights, yeah? So now I can grab my two rectangle lights, get the getter for them. Sweet. And then what we can do, we can drag off of them and we can look for set light color. Set light color is gonna set a linear color. Okay, we don't need to parameterize this. It's okay because we're gonna hard code it for every single ad because it's literally what we're doing. It's one texture anyway, so we don't want to do that. However, if you're using multiple different material instances, whatever, you might want to do that. In my case, I don't want to because I have only one set of 4 ads, so I can just hard code it in. And in this case, so we have our first ad is like some light bluish color, something like, yeah, some stuff like that. Then I'm gonna copy paste it, connect the execution pin and connect the targets by I did again shift left click and drag. The second one is Duarte, which is mainly red, so I'm gonna put a red, copy paste, same story, and then vector is green, and Oni, which is the last one, is basically white. That's just white, so I'm gonna leave it white and drag off again. So now if I hit compile and save, it's gonna grab the lights and set the color based on the execution pin they're on. So in this case, you know, like this is gonna be on Duarte. So if I hit simulate, it's gonna be red light now. There you go. Perfect. And if I switch to vector, it's gonna be green light. There you go. Perfect. That's not matching exactly, but you know, like I can go in and tweak it. So that's great. And like I said, also you can parameterize it and change it directly from here. Now, we want to add an extra level of complexity now, which is going to be a little bit tough, but if you follow, you will understand exactly how it works. So what I want to do is to make the ad switch from the first one to the last ad and roll back. Okay, so there is a pretty, okay, I'm gonna call it simple and maybe be shot for it. It's not that simple, but it is kind of simple if you know how to code. It's not so hard. So we're gonna run through it. So the first thing I want to do is drag off of this and look for branch. So why I'm calling in a branch? Because I want the option to have the ad dynamically switch or not, depending on a bool. Okay, so I'm gonna add new variable, leave it on Boolean, expose it, so make it visible, make it public, and call this bool should. Actually, let's just call it dynamic add, question mark. Great. I'm gonna drag off the getter and connect it to the condition. So what do I want here? If this is true, so if it is dynamic, then I want it to be switching. But if not, I do not want it to switch. So one of the easiest ways to make this thing switch is by calling in a simple delay node, right? And parameterize the value so that you can then change it to whatever you want. So first thing I want to do is call in a delay, and I'm going to parameterize this and expose it and call it add duration. Perfect. And this I will connect it to the true. So this is the first step, okay? The false I can directly connect it here. Actually, no, I'll refrain from that because we'll do some changes later. But here's the thing. In the beginning, when I start, I want it to be set to 0. To set to the first add rather. So we're gonna do a few changes now, and I will explain you why we're doing them. So what I want to do is I want to create a map, hit integer as the variable, and then you can go in here and set it as a map, right? And what we want from this, we want to map exactly an integer to our enum. So e_tutorial. Cannot find it. Yeah, there you go. e_tutorial add types. What's a map? So a T map is basically, to put it in very simple terms, this will translate to this. This is the easiest way I can think of, and of explaining it. So what you tell Unreal is that it should be mapping this integer to this specific variable in here, and now we're gonna map them. So I'm gonna start from the last one because this is not gonna allow me to keep clicking and add new ones if there's already a key selected. So I'm gonna go on the last one, on the Oni, and hit number 4, because if you remember right, it's 4 adds, but they start from 0, right? So maybe I should have named them 1, 2, 3, 4 in this case, but they start from 0, and that's the Oni. I'm gonna click again, go on vector, which is number 3. Then I'm gonna go on Duarte, which is gonna be number 2. Or maybe, sorry, I'm dreaming. My bad. Sorry. It starts from 3 to, yeah, I'm absolutely crazy. Sorry. I am sleepy. So 2 and then 3. So no, it was correct. Like, I'm an idiot. Apologies. And that's perfectly fine. So because it starts, we're gonna start from int 0 and then move our way up. So 0, 1, 2, 3. And the last one is Oni. So now what we're telling Unreal, because the enumerator, we only get the string, we're not really getting a quantifiable number for it, right? Like, it's not like switching on int. Like if we use something like switch on int, would have been much easier, because this does exactly the same that this does, but with the difference that we get an int, so we get a number. And this one, we actually get the drop-down menu. So I wanted the cool drop-down menu, but at the same time, I don't want to sacrifice the functionality of not having an int. So that's why I'm using this map. And now we have it mapped, okay? So what we want to do now is we want to drag off of here, still control-click drag, and we get this, it's called new variable. I'm just going to call it map. Perfect. So from this map, we want to grab 2 things. We want to get the find, okay? And we want to get the length. Simply the length is it gets the last number, okay? So it gets the last element stored into this map, right? So we can, by the way, compile and save and we'll see it. Perfect. So it gets the last element in this map. And in this case, well, it will be our number 3. Now what we want to do in the find, we want to run this selector. Nope, sorry, that's the enum. What we want is actually to get an int, okay? So we can hit plus here, get an integer, not a map though. So we click on it and call it actually selector int. Perfect. But we do not want the map here. We want a single, okay? So we get a single int and we can drag it off, get it, and plug it in here. Soon you will see why I'm doing this, okay? But for now, we're gonna keep going. Then what I want is to get a select node. And this is gonna give us 2 options. It's gonna give option 1, option 2, and the condition, which is the wildcard, okay? The condition is gonna be that should switch dynamically. Actually, dynamic add. So here, when this bool is true or false, it's gonna do several things, you know. See, it's here, it's also plugged here for this. Now, why I'm doing this? Because I want to be able to, if I don't select this dynamic add, as in I don't want it to be dynamic, I want to use the adds types thingy, like enum, right? So the selection enum. Now this is important because if we don't have this plugged in and we're not using the dynamic add bool, as in like we're not using all this logic to make it switch, we're gonna be in trouble because then we cannot select the add. So the selector is effectively telling, and now I can plug it in, is effectively telling this this enum here function, the switch, that if this boolean is true, great, then go find this, and then later we'll add more stuff. But if it's not, I want to have that selector enum, right? I want to have the selector enum, and I want to be able to select which add should be displayed, okay? And this, by the way, I had to do the select also. This is important. This is outputting exactly this tutorial add types enum, okay? And obviously what goes in here has to be the same. You cannot put an int in here, for example. It has to be the same type. So here we have the length, okay? Now what we want, this is gonna be a little bit more complex now. What we wanna do here, think about it. We have an int that is finding, right, the exact number in the map. And what I want is to add to this int every time we reach the end. I know that in the beginning it's gonna be 0 because I wanna set it that way. So the first time is always gonna be 0. So maybe it's good to start from that. So I can actually get a branch here, but this is gonna happen regardless. This is gonna be either way. So yeah, I can also plug the false in here. So the only thing is that if it's not dynamic, it will completely bypass the delay, okay? And if it's the first time, so I'm gonna need a new bool here, by the way. Great, so first time, if it is the first time, then fantastic. We're gonna get our selector int. By the way, this is gonna be a setter, not a getter. So Alt, left click and drag. We're gonna set our selector into 0. So I'm gonna force it, if it's the first time, to select it to 0. And after it's done with that, I can get the first time bool, but as a setter this time, and I'm gonna set it to false. That's it. That's all I need to do. And I can then plug this straight into the switcher. Okay? That's it. Done. So now every time we're gonna hit begin play is gonna evaluate this bool if it's true or not. And if it is true, which is the beginning, oh, it was false by default. And yeah, okay, perfect. So by default it's gonna be true, okay? When it runs through this logic, it's then gonna set it to false. And when it doubles back, it's gonna be false and it's just gonna completely ignore it. So, however, if it is false, so it's not the first time, what we wanna do is we wanna set the int again, but this time we're gonna do something different. So we are gonna create now a new variable, which we're gonna call it new int. And it's still an integer, as you may have guessed. Perfect. No need to expose any of these. But what I'm gonna do is that I'm gonna Alt drag, and I'm gonna set it on the execution pins at the end. Now, what this is gonna do is gonna set this specific int, okay, to a specific value, which is gonna be 0, 1, 2, and 3, okay? Now, let's actually finish the loop so that you're gonna understand a little bit better how it works. So I'm gonna branch. Why do I want this branch? Because again, I wanted to set it either that is dynamically switching or that is not. So in this case, once again, as you may have guessed, we grab our, where is our bool dynamic add, get the getter for it, and run it in here in the condition. Now, if it's false, I want it to do literally nothing. But if it's true, however, I want it to backtrack all the way to the delay and plug it in here. Now, I'm gonna create a reroute just to be a little bit cleaner here. And that's pretty much, ooh, is it going through it? Never mind that reroute, I guess. So if it's true, it's then gonna double back and start again from that delay, okay? And then run through the logic again. But now we possess something cool, which is this new int. So what we're gonna do here is that we're gonna grab, first of all, a select. So we need to select. I'm gonna make some more space. It's not a lot of space here. We wanna get the new int. So control drag just together. And then we're gonna hit plus, like drag off and hit plus and get an add. So what I wanna do is every time it doubles back, so it's gonna run through this condition, see if it's the first time or not. If it's not the first time, it's gonna run in here. And I want it, if there is the new int, to add 1 every single time. So it's gonna add 1 to the previous int that was in there and run it in the option 0, sorry. On option 1, I will leave it as 0 because if not, I'll just leave it on 0 because I will show you in a second why. Because if the int in the end is greater than the length, so in this case the length, so we can look for greater than, I want to meet this condition and reset it back to 0. Why? Because if it loops, it goes up to 3, then goes up to 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's gonna get stuck on the last add and do nothing because there is nothing after the number 3 here. So what I want it to do is that it will keep adding numbers here on this new int. So new int plus 1, it will be then plus 2, plus 3. Once it reaches the end, so the length of our map, which is gonna be the number 3 here, if it's greater and that condition is met, it will release a true statement from this bool, okay? So this bool will flip to true. And when this is true, I want it to flip the int back to 0, effectively looping back to number 0. So you may have guessed it, we want to run this return value into this. So we're effectively setting the selector int back to 0. Now this execution pin, we can run it also into the switcher. And our job here is done. Because now this is setting the selector int back to 0 and the selector int is going into the finder, if you remember correctly. So selector int back to 0, into the finder, which is this as the getter, so I don't have to drag off and plug it in there and be annoying. And this is gonna now work perfectly. So that's pretty much it. That's the whole thing. It's not so difficult, but let's recap real quick. So we have our add frame, drag off of it, create a dynamic material instance. This is being set to a parameter just to not have spaghetti all over the place. And we have the first branch. Is the add dynamic? If it's true, it's gonna run through the delay. If it's false, it's gonna bypass it. So there is also the duration, which is set to 0.2. We're gonna set to a default on 1. I forgot to do that. It's gonna run to the second branch, which is the bool, which is gonna be the first time bool. If it is the first time, it will set the selector into 0, which will then pick from the finder the element 0 from this map, which is gonna be Hyperion add. And then set the bool to false, run through this, and do all our mapping shenanigans and light shenanigans. And then it's gonna, depending on where it is, gonna set the new int, either 0, 1, 2, or 3, go through the branch. If the add should be dynamic, cool, it's gonna double back. If it's false, well, it shouldn't be dynamic, so it's gonna stop right here. It's gonna double back, hit the delay again, and go through. Now this bool is gonna be false, which means it's gonna run into here, into the selector int. Now, this is gonna check the new int, which we had before, so already set at the end, and it's gonna add 1. So it's gonna plus 1, and it's just gonna go up. Now, if this is greater than the length, which is, remember, like the last, the whole of the numbers, so it's like 4 numbers. If it's greater than the length, if it's not greater than the length, it will just add 1, go into the false because this bool flag is going to be false if it's not, and then get the return value into the selector, set it, and then the selector is going to get the second element, which is going to be Duarte, and so on and so forth until it reaches the end. When it reaches the end, it's going to meet this condition, and then it's going to turn this bool to true. Once it turns this bool flag to true, instead of going and picking the new int with the +1, it's going to pick the 0. And then it's going to set the selector int to 0. Okay? The selector int is going to call 0 from the find, and that's going to set, again, the number 0, Hyperion. And yeah, remember that this is, again, if we have the dynamic add, so we can use the selector and select the add that we want without it being dynamically switching. One last cool thing I might want to do here, just for the sake of setting it up before we even start in the construction script, I can get a couple getters for my lights. These are going to be the same lights. They're the same for the ads, so it doesn't really matter. I'm going to drag off and look for set intensity. Drag off again. Set radius. Attenuation radius. And one last thing I want to do actually is set volumetric scatter intensity. Perfect. Now I want to connect both of them in. Sweet. And connect them to the execution pins. And now I'm going to convert these two parameters. Sorry, promote them to variable. I'm just going to leave them called like that. New intensity, new radius, but the last one, I'm going to name it. I want to name them something a little bit better, but for for the demonstration purposes, I'm going to leave them at that, not to eat too much of your time. And of course, you want to promote them, make them public so that we can see them in the blueprint. Now, if I compile and save, well, you'll see this execution pin is running because we are currently in the construction script. So what I can do here is that I can set the intensity. Now, as per usual in whenever I work in blueprints and not in C++, I forget to set variables. So I'm going to make 2000 of this. The radius, I'm going to make it 1000. And the scatter intensity on 3, so to speak. See if it works. Oh, Jesus. That is very strong, as you can see. So I'm going to reduce the intensity quite a bit. Scatter intensity to 1.6 maybe. And as you can see, I can modify the radius to something like, I don't know, 260. That's okay. It's more than enough. Maybe reduce the intensity a little more. Perfect. That works for me. As duration, I'm gonna leave it on 1. Doesn't matter what I set because it doesn't really matter. It's gonna do it automatically. And I'm gonna hit now simulate. And now you will see that it will be dynamically switching them. Or not, because I did not click dynamic add. I need sleep. Okay. Simulate again. And now it works. Look at that. It's switching, the lights are switching as well. Everything is working as it should. And you see once it reaches Oni, which is number 4, it's gonna whoop, go back to the first one and loop again. 2, 3, and 4, loop back. 2, 3, 4, perfect. Now, because this is a dynamic material instance, I can also duplicate it and remove the isDynamicAdd and then change it to something else. And even though it's the same material instance, it's not going to be affected at all by, by the code running. Because why? Because like I said, it's a dynamic material instance. It's like a copy of that material instance that it's creating. It's not messing around with the original variables inside the material instance, which is great because it'll allow us a lot of flexibility without creating 10 different material instances and switching in between them. It's way neater like this. Anyway, as you can see, it's working, lights are working, everything is working, and this one is switching while the other one is just staying on vector. Alrighty, that concludes it for this little fun lecture. I hope you had a lot of fun, and I hope this helps you out in your future projects. By the way, a little last note. This workflow here, as in like for creating a dynamic material instance and then setting scalars, can work literally for anything. Like you can have a material that in time it changes completely based on this. And there are ways to do it, which we will explore more later on in our technical journey. I think I'll make this into a series if you guys like it. But yeah, we can, still drag off and set other things. For example, instead of set scalar, we can look for set vector, I think, parameter value. Yeah, there you go, set vector parameter value, where you can set a vector 3, if I remember correctly, actually a vector 4. So you can change the color of something, if you have a specific parameter that is a color value, so a vector 3, you can change that. You can change a ton of things, okay, within your material instance. And this makes things very dynamic, and you can really do a lot with blueprints if you know what you're doing. Anyway, I hope this helps you, and as always, have a good one.